Welcome to Bible study. My name is Patty Baker. We are looking at a collection of the ancient texts. These are scrolls and writings that have been put together to something as commonly known as the Bible. We're studying the book of Acts, and we're finishing out Acts 27, last couple verses of that chapter. And I want to just give you a brief preview of where we've been so that we can finish out this chapter today. I think you're really going to like it. Acts 27, for those of you who is your first time dropping in, or you haven't been here in a minute, or you just forgot what happened a few days ago. Here's where we are. Paul is being sent as a prisoner from Caesarea after a conflict that he had with the Jewish leaders to see Caesar in Rome. He's going to stand trial there. He's been falsely accused of a variety of things, but the Jews just are like, man, he's powerfully influential. He's taking people away from the Jewish traditions, and he's going around talking about the teachings of Jesus. Don't forget, we killed him. So we just need to get rid of him. And Paul learned through a series of circumstances that they were setting up an ambush to kill him after they had let the soldier who's overseeing the centurion, who's overseeing the prisoners. The Jewish leader said, hey, we just want to let you know we're willing to talk to this guy and kind of work things out within our religious community. And Paul learned that they were actually going to ambush the soldiers and kill him on his way. So he went to the centurion and said, hey, I'm a Roman and I would like a trial in front of Caesar in Rome. So he was granted that, and that's where he's headed. Now he's on a ship with 276 other people and a few of his friends, Luke being one of them, who's writing this account from the course of his observation. And this violent storm drives this ship off course for days. And they're having to unload cargo. They unloaded anchors. The survival of the fittest, right? And at some point in the middle of the chaos, the crew senses that there's land coming. And so they try and set the ship up just to kind of hole up for a minute until they could see at dawn where this land actually is. And then they secretly went out to the lifeboat to try and escape. So Paul insists, as he's seeing this go down, he says to the centurion and the soldiers, if you all want to survive, these boys need to stay here because they're essential for our survival. And so the soldiers cut the lifeboats, and now daylight's finally come. They see land. The sailors take some decisive action to move as safely as possible toward this land with this ship. They cut the rest of the anchors. They raise the last sail that they have. They do everything that they can to reach shore. But even with all of that, the ship runs aground and it breaks apart. That's where we are. And last study, we talked about what happens when you do everything right and things still go wrong. So take a look at the last video that you can see right before this one in the timeline, and you can catch that one. We talked about obedience in doing the right thing. It may not align you with the right direction. Doesn't mean that you weren't called to do it. Just because you do the right thing doesn't guarantee the outcome. And also, a framework was given for when you need to make that decision. When do I stay and when do I go? In a job, onward in your schooling, or are you finished? I don't have the degree yet, but do I still finish the coursework when I'm wanting to do something else? Do I stay in this relationship? What am I needing to do in my career? So these are things that we struggle with every day. Should I stay or should I go? So I outlined a good framework of questions that you can ask just to determine whether you're moving forward based upon fear or based upon wisdom. Today, we're going to see what happens next as this ship is breaking apart. 276 people trying to save their life. They did not get to shore. this bay that they had seen out in the distance that had a beach with a little bit calmer water is where they were headed, but they hit a sandbar in the process. This is a pretty big ship. It was a grain ship, came up out of Egypt, had grain on it, and it was going obviously to Rome. So a merchant ship, and I'm sure a very deep hull to handle that kind of grain. And it's obviously hitting some of the shallower areas before they hit the island or land that they see, and they don't know what that is yet. Acts 27 verses 42 to 44. The soldiers decided to kill the prisoners so that none of them could swim away and escape. But Julius, the officer over those soldiers, wanted to let Paul live. He did not allow the soldiers to kill any of the prisoners, and instead, he ordered everyone who could swim to jump into the water and to swim to land, and the rest to use wooden boards or pieces of the ship. And this is how all the people made it safely to land. Earlier, and I just mentioned this in the intro here, that the sailors were trying to escape to save themselves. And the soldiers were like, no, because we don't know what we're doing on this ship. We don't know where we're going. You guys have the skill set. And I referenced to this the last 2 or 3 studies where it's like a flight attendant. You're called to care for those in the air. And if there is a decrease in cabin pressure or there is something that happens with the plane, it is your responsibility to handle it. You're assigned to do that. And that is exactly what these sailors were doing, only they decided, we're going to jump ship. So the soldiers pulled them back and said, no. And we talked about this a couple of studies before about how you may have competence, but you've also got to have the character and the morality to stay in it based upon your responsibility and your role. So now we're looking at these soldiers, and now they're considering killing prisoners to save themselves. Not physically, but in a different way. Let's look at it. Because under Roman law, a soldier was personally responsible for his prisoners under his watch and care. So if a prisoner escaped, the guard received the prisoner's punishment. And oftentimes that was death. So that's what we're looking at here. Now we're safely to land. These prisoners, if they escape and I live, not going to be good. So now these soldiers are coming into the realization of this. So now they're planning to kill all of these prisoners. Survival pressure is what's here. Isn't it amazing how when we get into survival mode for ourselves, how our thought process changes quickly? Because they meaning the soldiers, the night before were cutting the ropes off the lifeboat so the sailors couldn't leave. And now the soldiers are going to turn around and kill the prisoners to save themselves. They're at the point of impact. The ship is breaking. Control is gone. As in our human experience, control plays a huge role in who we are. And survival now gets personal for these soldiers. And this is critical for us to understand, because now the fear is no longer, are we going to survive the storm? It's what happens to me if they survive and escape. Here is a really good teaching point that was a good teaching point for me, and hope it is for you. But as pressure increases, fear becomes more personal, doesn't it? As pressure increases, fear becomes so much more personal. Because it's easy to look at somebody else and go, oh, well, that happened to them because of their experience. But then when it starts happening to you, and now there's pressure on top of that fear, how is this impacting me, my career, my kids, my marriage, my relationships, my family, my community, it could go on. So the ship is breaking apart, control is gone, survival now becomes individual because we can't save the ship. So this shift on the ship from collective survival to personal accountability, earlier they needed everybody, and now they fear everyone. So when systems break down, people often shift from cooperation to self-protection. And oftentimes you'll see that in arguing in relationships. Everything's good for the common good of the relationship and the family or whatever. But then if it starts getting personal and there's a fear of being exposed, shame, guilt, whatever, now we're going to go into self-protection mode. And that self-protection mode means I'm going to control the situation. It's the survival of the fittest. And now I'm going to go ahead and externally, petty as it is, go ahead and blame everybody outside of myself. And it also looks even a little differently if you want to shift your focus in this. When systems break down, people will shift into self-protection mode. Those of you, I know all of you, experienced COVID-19. And everybody was buying toilet paper in the United States. It was crazy. And what happened then was we were protecting ourselves. And I remember seeing this man who had, there was one package of toilet paper on the shelf. And he had already put 3 packages, and there was no limit at this point. He'd already put 3 packages in. And he was an older gentleman, I would say in his late 60s, early 70s. And here I come with my cart, and I turn around the corner, and I see he's the only one down the aisle. Now, I'm not going down for toilet paper. I don't know what I was going down there for, but it definitely wasn't toilet paper. And the whole aisle on that side was empty, except for one last one. And he looked back at me, and I smiled. And I realized we have masks on. But I smile. And he turns around, grabs that last one, takes a quick look back at me, and shoves it in his cart. And my smile went to laughter, which now can be heard, not just seen from here up, right? Because it's comical to me that we will go to lengths when there is a fear of what we're going to do for self-protection, even if it comes down to toilet paper. I have a friend, and that was 6 years ago, almost now, since COVID, and he still has toilet paper in his basement that he purchased. Crazy. Self-protection. Self-preservation over protection of the overall relationship. That's tough. Fear plus self-preservation. When fear takes over, and trust me when I tell you, and you can come up with examples yourself, people will most times abandon the social, communal responsibility to protect themselves. The sailors, they were immediately going to abandon their role. The soldiers pulled them back. And now the soldiers, they're about to abandon their role because they're not going to be responsible if these ones, so they're just going to kill them. Because fear will justify our actions that we would have never considered in calm conditions. Never. So we're motivated by the fear, not necessarily by the wisdom. Unchecked fear, and this is where our self-awareness comes in, turns responsibility into liability if fear is not checked. Because now you're going to lose opportunities. out of fear, relationships out of fear, and in this case, lives would be lost out of fear. Now you could say, hey, they're prisoners. Obviously, they were convicted of something, or else they wouldn't be in prison, and they wouldn't be being transported to Rome, of all places. So the hub for power and justice. So you see here that losing opportunities and losing relationships, losing lives out of fear is unnecessary. But it happens all the time. Happens all the time. Who stops it here? As we were reading in the text, it says that Julius stops it. He is the supervisor over the soldiers who are overseeing these prisoners to go from Caesarea to Rome. And he stops the soldiers from killing the prisoners. And the reason why it says in this text is because of Paul. Now, most of the New Testament puts Paul front and center. He is, larger than life. He's got a huge personality. He's charismatic. He's a natural born leader. He's an alpha male. He's extroverted, type A. This is your dude. And so he's the one who stepped up to make sure that the soldiers knew about the sailors. And now Julius is like, Paul's been consistent. I couldn't even figure out what the Jews had against this guy, but nonetheless, he's deserving of a trial. He's been accurate. He's cared about everybody on this ship. And at some point, the moment comes that Julius intervenes because he values Paul's life, that if it wasn't for him, the rest of them would have been lost. So that decision not only saves Paul, but it saves all of the prisoners. Influence and credibility are built over time when there is consistency in the storm, and it can change the outcome. And that's critical. That's a critical moment. The outcome, of course, is that everybody survives, but not how they expected. Some swim, some cling to pieces of broken ship. The ship's gone, the structure is gone, but the people make it. And I want to tie this back to the previous lesson about the sailors. The ship broke, but the people were preserved. And I think sometimes survival doesn't look like strength. You are just holding on by the skin of your teeth, right? It looks like holding on to whatever is left for dear life. And that holding on requires all the strength you have. It may not look like strength, but it's all you've got. And that's how they managed to make it to shore. Fear will push you to protect yourself at the expense of others. You'll do it in arguments because you're protecting your ego. You're protecting your public perception, what others think of you. And you're protecting your need to be right, your need to be in control. Fear causes all of us, as part of the human experience, to at some point look at ourselves only for the survival of whatever that is in the moment. But trust, faith holds you in place even when everything is breaking apart. Uncertainty will always be. And we can't be so rooted in fear that we're already thinking about something in the future that hasn't even happened yet. So now our fear is connected to uncertainty of the future that hasn't even played out. And the sailors, we're all going to die. Well, we made it close enough to get there, and everybody survived. And now the soldiers are like, we're going to die because these dudes are going to escape because we don't have any control over them anymore because the structure that we had them contained on the ship is junk, floating around, sinking. So we better kill them off. Survival for themselves. Fear is going to push us to protect ourselves at the expense of others. But we've got to be able to be aware enough and focused enough on the reality of the moment, our faith, our character, to trust, even when everything's breaking apart, to hold wisdom instead. So where is fear tempting you to protect yourself? And how is that impacting the people around you? In a way that compromises your responsibility or your character. Because that's really what it comes down to. And it's easy to see once you become aware of it. Because you're like, oh, I see how they're protecting themselves in this conversation. They're always the hero. They are seeking validation. Other people said this about me. So it's all about their self-image and their public perception. And that fear that they're going to look bad is holding them in a place where they're going to make decisions that are going to hurt others in the process. Next week, chapter 28, let's see where they land. Who are the indigenous people? What do they think about this group that just showed up on their island? And how are they going to be received? And of course, Paul is central to this account. So we're going to see what they think about him and how he reacts and responds to the people and the environment. We're going to get bit by a snake next week. So make sure to come back and check out this next study that we have. Until we see each other again, may the truth that we learned today soften your heart and feed your spirit, renew your mind, and guide your steps until we meet again.